morning, gents, and welcome to the latest episode of the WorldBuilder Tip of the Week on behalf of co2.org. This is MonolithicBacon, and this week we're going to be having a look at staircases. Now, this is something that I used to be quite nervous about doing. They were always too difficult for me, but as I've started to use them more and more, I'm starting to find my fangs. So, if you have a look at Citard, which we used last week, there are staircases everywhere, and they are this design of staircase where infantry can walk up and down them, with vehicles as well, with no problems at all. There can be any width that you want, from narrow to quite wide. And what I'll do is show you how to do these in the simplest way possible on this map. So, if we get this area here, nice open space, that could do with another staircase, even if there are two here, you've got to prepare the ground first, so it's a lot better to do this as early as possible into your map development. So what I'll do, considering this is the end of my development, is just get rid of all the grass here, because we don't need it. And what you need to do is go onto the height map editor, knock the feather down to 0, and sample the lower ground. And then just flatten the entire area out, including some of the higher ground as well, don't worry about that, until you've got a nice broad area where your staircase will fit. After that, you want to go onto spline placement, and tick and select the deform spline tool. At this point, look over the area that you're going to be working on, and in as straight a line as possible, click 4 points where the staircase would be from side to side. And that's the most important point about this. You aren't using the deform spline to create a staircase from bottom to top, you're doing it from side to side, and I'll show you why. So, once you've got your 4 points, hit enter, and it'll give you your very basic spline. For now, don't do anything with that, it's not important. What we've got to do instead is find the actual steps that you'll be using to create a staircase. So go onto the object placement tool. You want to go onto EBPS, Environment, Art Ambient, Objects, and then Steps. Within this folder, you've got loads of different types of staircases, but only one is really useful. Don't think it's going to be staircase 01. That's the complete opposite of what you want to be looking for. That's more of a scenic design for ruins. Instead, you want 8x2, 3 steps. Once you place that down, it's a nice, simple 3-step piece. Now, one thing to note about this is that this staircase does not technically count as an object. It's an entity instead. Sorry, it's visual. So, your infantry and vehicles will move right through it as if it doesn't exist. So what you'll have to do is place land underneath this staircase so that it gives the impression of someone climbing up it, even though they're actually not. On this staircase over here, you can see that only partially the steps are visible, sometimes less than half of them. The rest of it is actually just ground underneath, but it gives the impression that they're really climbing staircases from a distance. So what you've got to do is create a staircase first before you change the land underneath it. So, once you've got a staircase in place, hold the C key and copy it, line it up with the previous one, and then hold the H key to change the height of it. Once you've gotten 2, you can hold the shift and select them both, and again, hold the C key, move them in place, hold the H key, and move them up. And do this a couple of times depending on how large your staircase has to be. But if I'm not mistaken, this should be just about right for mine, because you have to ensure that the top step is about level with the ground that you're working towards. So they are about even. Some things might change, but that looks good to me. So now that I've gotten that in place, select all the stairs and make sure that they are adjustable. You don't want them to move. So adjustable instead of relative to terrain, and now we can change the land underneath them. So, go back to the spline that you placed before, make sure you're still on deform mode. Now the idea is to make sure your deform spline is as wide as the staircase you've just created. So if I have a look at 12 and set to present width, it's probably a bit shy. of that. So I will instead make it 213. And that's about as near as down as it's going to be. It's better to be over than under. But one thing I have noticed is that my staircase isn't in line with the road at the top, which it ought to be. The spline is sort of in line. I might move that slightly. But the staircase itself definitely needs to be rotated. So now that that's lined up, and the spline is lined up too, if you're used to using deform splines, then you'll know, but by holding the H key, you can change the height as if the spline were an object. It's great for building trenches. But what you want to do is just raise it any height, it doesn't really matter for now. And then when you're on the deform option, go on to edit profile. This new window has a black line from point to point. Now these points count as the edges of the width of your spline. If you click anywhere in this white area, it will create nodes that will form the shape of the spline. So by moving this end node all the way to the bottom and hitting apply, it creates a perfectly straight ramp. And it can't get any more straight than that. Much better than if you try to do it by hand. The only thing you've got to do now is to change the height so that the upper end moves with it. And immediately you can see that that staircase is almost spot on already. It isn't always that easy, but sometimes you get quite fortunate. That I am very, very happy with, and that will do me. So, before you do anything else, don't worry about that for now. You've just got to change the upper part of the land first. So, go back onto the height map editor, make sure the feather's still at the bottom, and sample the upper ground. Make your brush size nice and small, and you've just got to try and fill in all the gaps that you got rid of before. But don't worry about the edges, just the top. And you should come out with a nice smooth transition from top to bottom. Once you've gotten that, click on the spline again, bake it, and that is no longer a spline. That now counts as terrain. From here on, just fill in the last little bits of the gaps. I'll just do the top parts here. Then feather all the way to the top and smooth the rest. You can put as much detail into this bit as you like, it's entirely up to you, but that looks absolutely fine for me. Now you've got a staircase, it's lacking some extra details. At this point, you want to try and put railings or walls at the side of it. This is where it's entirely your choice depending on what you're looking for. In this staircase next to me, I've used support walls. These are indestructible and will offer infantry cover and block vehicles. This is great if you want this to be a permanent addition to your level that can affect gameplay. Perfect for outer skirmishes. However, over here I've got an early game staircase. So these small walls can be knocked down by vehicles and will be knocked down as well, and only offer cover to infantry early in the game. So the idea is put this kind of staircase towards the very centre of the map, so that when the combat starts getting heavy and the big tanks start rolling out, they aren't being blocked by support walls that should have been blown away hours ago. So, for this example, I'm going to make this into an infantry staircase, or something that will get destroyed over time. So on the spline tool, go on to objects. You want to go into wall mode and adjustable to terrain. Then jump onto EBPS, environment, art ambient, objects, walls, stone, and then it's entirely your choice from here. Personally, I think brick S1 and 2 look great for staircase walls, so I use brick S2. Add the object to the list, make sure my object spline is ticked, hover over the staircase, and place 4 points from top to bottom. And there you have it, your first railing in place, going at the exact same gradient as the stairs. Then, as before, just hold C, and copy the staircase railing across, and there you have the beginning of what your staircase should look like. Now the next 2 steps are just finishing touches. So I'll show you what I usually do on mine, and you can copy it if you want to. But when you go onto the tile, you want to ensure that there's something underneath the stairs that looks quite realistic. Now, considering this is a city and it's partly a ruin, I want this to look a little bit more grubby and dirty. So I'll go high on the feather, low on the strength, and get a dusty rubble tile, and just get rid of all this grass that's underneath it, and make it look a bit more crumbled. Now, as this enters more gameplay, and as tanks and vehicles start rolling over these stairs, they will start to break and crumble apart themselves anyway. But that's just a way to add little details to it, so that it blends in with the rest of the city. Apart from that, the last little step I want to show you is how to add these small lines of rubble on steps to make them look like they're part of a working city. So, although I could copy this splat across, I will show you exactly where to get it first. So go onto the splat tool, forget about rotation and scale. Instead, you want to go all the way down to NM debris. And then down this list, you'll find something called side litter. When you right click this, it'll be huge, like this. Hold shift down to rotate it to how you want. And if you also hold shift and right click, you can change the size of it as you want. So I'll make this one about this size, line it up with your steps, and then hold the C key to copy and move them wherever you want. Also use the mirror keys if you want them to look a little bit different to each other. And that should do. So any other finishing touches that you want to add can vary. Here I've put things like hedgerows to block line of sight temporarily, or on smaller ones added bushes, but it's entirely up to you to change the effect of your staircase to blend in. Other than this, this is one of the simpler versions of staircase. You can get more and more complicated. So if you get a bit confident, try building a static staircase, something that's built entirely out of the land that you have to do all yourself. Anyway, this has been MonolithicBacon for Kotu.org, and I will see you next time.